All right, well, greetings everyone. At this time, we're going to get started with our lightning talk session. At this time, I would like any students giving a lightning talk to turn their camera on so we can see everybody's smiling faces just at the start here. My name is Tyler Hatch. I'm currently a project scientist working at NASA Glenn Research Center up in Cleveland, Ohio. And my work mainly focuses on fluid physics in microgravity environments. And this includes a mixture of both some of the more fundamental science, such as soft matter, liquid crystals, microscopy, and then a lot of the more applied systems as well, such as life support on the space station and some of the plant growth technologies they're working on there. So a little bit of background about myself, at least regarding Space Grant. I did receive both my bachelor's and master's degrees at NC State in Raleigh a couple years ago. And I'm currently working on a PhD part-time up here in Cleveland. At least with the Space Grant, I've mentored several students who've been recipients of the NC Space Grant Award during my time at NASA. And amongst myself and my colleagues, we usually mentor about 10 students in total via NASA internships every semester, and those are students from all over the country. In addition to that, I do enjoy giving back where I can. I do a lot of teaching and outreach, and I give lectures to local schools regarding microgravity environments, and we even have a mobile drop tower to demonstrate some microgravity experiments you can do at home pretty easily. So just some housekeeping items for today. With these lightning talks, we are going to try and stick to the agenda. That way, if anyone is tuning in for our particular talk, we can hopefully have them tune in at the right time for that. We are planning to save questions for the end of the session. If there is some leftover time, I may ask one or two questions for an individual speaker, but the majority of the questions will be at the end. So please put your questions in the chat for us, and we'll take a look at those towards the end of our lightning talk session. So with that, looking at the students today, we have 6 lightning talks scheduled. And then these students are a representation of the entire 2021-2022 cohort of NC Space Grant awardees. And although we don't have time for all of the students to present today, there are links in the chat for the rest of the student awardees and recipients, so please check that out when you have the chance. I think there's over 65 in total, so it's a lot of good information there. But with that, it looks like we can turn to our first talk, so that'll be with Richard. Richard Hollenbach is a doctoral student at Duke University who was awarded a space grant for the 2021-2022 school year, and he's conducted research in investigating unsteady aerodynamics in turbofan aircraft and turbopump rocket engines exhibiting non-synchronous vibrations. This is actually his second NC Space Grant Award, and it expands on its previous research. So Richard, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sharing my screen and we're good to go. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, I am Richard Hollenbach. I am actually recently defended my PhD at Duke University. So I'll be presenting my talk today on unsteady pressure analysis of the 3-stage turbine. Specifically, I'm looking for non-synchronous vibrations, also known as NSV. Okay, so turbomachinery has been around for a long time, but it's some of the most powerful machines there are today, from your jet engines to your rocket pumps. And there are multiple engine companies that design this turbomachinery, from Rolls-Royce to General Electric or Pratt & Whitney. And they employ either their own homegrown codes or commercial software such as ANSYS CFX. But at the center of it all is consortiums such as the GUIDE Consortium, which solves the problems that are out there faced by engine manufacturers or in the software by studying these phenomena. This particular set of vibrations, called non-synchronous vibration, was actually found and published in a paper in 2003. You can see the left-hand side is some strain gauge data that was on a compressor blade, and it reacted at the first torsional mode with pretty high response at 2 frequencies. This work was brought to Duke University to try to recreate it, and we can see on the right-hand plot that the final frequency was about 9% off. So more studies were required. So specifically on my work, I took a very simple configuration to start, and that was a circular cylinder. So you can see in the two videos here, well, we can study an unlocked case where an unsteady aerodynamic instability, such as vortex shedding, if it's distinctly far away from an enforced or natural frequency, you get two separate frequencies and low amplitudes of vibration, so it's pretty safe. And that's that bottom case here. However, when that vortex shedding locks in or jumps onto the natural mode of vibration, you get large amplitudes of lift, large vibration, and that can cause blade failure in your jet engine. The reason I started with the simple cylinder was I wanted to, get some results pretty quick and understand the flow physics that was going on within this case. One day we hope to build a design tool for engine manufacturers because there's nothing out there right now. Now, moving on to a slightly more representative case, I studied the NACA 0012 airfoil, and we can see the same phenomenon here. So in the top, you can see that the vortex shedding locks into the motion of the airfoil. Now, instead of translating up and down like the cylinder did, the airfoil now pitches around its quarter cord. And at the bottom case, you can see an unlocked case where the frequencies have separated to unsteady pressures due to vortex shedding and then due to motion. But at the end of the day, we really want something that represents turbo machinery. So in a partnership with Hanover, Germany at Leibniz University, a 3-stage turbine was constructed. And you can see some pictures here of a former 5-stage turbine rig converted to a 3-stage turbine rig to study this phenomenon in a true representative format. Now, they did all the experiments, and to support it, as a graduate student, part of my dissertation was to do all of the CFD or computer simulation analysis. So rather than simulating the full engine, which is really large and really complex, we simplified it to a single passage. So you can see all 6 blades in this passage. And then we use periodic boundary conditions to simulate it being a full 360-degree circle. What are some of the results that we are looking for? So as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, I'm searching for this non-synchronous vibrations. So when I ran the CFD, I would get a pressure plot on either some of the rotors or maybe at some of the locations where experiments are collecting data. And you get the bottom left time signal. And then through fast Fourier transform analysis that I did in MATLAB, I could identify potential frequencies. So on the left in the green circle, you would see what we think is the non-synchronous frequencies. And then on the orange is blade passing or other frequencies that we know we would expect to find in this experiments or in the computational simulations. CFD is really great though, because we can actually visualize what's going on in the flow here. So I performed a lot of flow visualization. The first plot is a mid-plane plot of the streamline. So you can see the behavior of the flow around all of each stage and each blade. We can see a vortex actually at the last one. And then we can plot things like entropy, calculated variables through CFD, and you can also see the vortex there. I'm coming up at the end of my time, so I do want to thank the North Carolina Space Grant for their support these past 2 years. I'll take some questions if there's time, otherwise we'll get to some questions later. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. I'm not seeing any questions in there at this point, but first of all, congrats on the PhD, and I was wondering if you had any future plans after graduation.
Absolutely. So I accepted a job with Exponent Consulting. They do scientific and engineering consulting down in Atlanta. I'm going to be doing thermal sciences, which encompasses aerospace, heat transfer, fluid dynamics.
Great. Okay, there is one question here. So based on what you've learned, what are future directions for your research, and where do you see future applications of the information you gleaned from this project?
Absolutely. So the goal is one day to have a design tool that Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, General Electric could use to design their engine to avoid this phenomenon from actually occurring. That design tool hasn't been built yet, but the next steps would be taking what we learned from this process and designing that tool.
Great. Well, thank you, Richard. I think we're going to move on at this point, but great talk. And let's see, next up we have Kelyah Spurgeon. So Kelyah is currently a master's student at North Carolina A&T State University, and she was awarded an NC Space Grant Graduate Research Fellowship in the 2021-2022 school year. She conducted research assessing how microgravity affects the evolution and behavior of Streptococcus mutans biofilms. So the floor is yours, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelyah Spurgeon. I'm a second-year master's student at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, working in the Thomas Lab. My research aims to assess the impact of simulated microgravity on the adaptation of Streptococcus mutans biofilms. I'm sure a lot of you have heard by now about the ambitious manned spaceflight missions planned for the future. Unfortunately, there's still a lot we don't know about how spaceflight affects our bodies. We know that humans need water, air, and food to survive in space, but we also know that there are morphological and biological changes that our bodies undergo in space, such as decreased bone marrow absorption and decreased salivary lysozyme production. However, we still don't know why astronauts display an increased rate of dental plaque buildup leading to dental disease. In 2012, it was predicted that dental caries would be among the top 5 medical conditions that would negatively impact future space missions, and not much is known on why this risk exists. Here on Earth, Streptococcus mutans is known as the etiologic agent of dental caries. Formation of biofilms facilitated by S. mutans can lead to severe dental diseases like cavities, gingivitis, and periodontitis. S. mutans resides in the mouth as a commensal microbe for humans, but its virulent state on the right side of the black and white photo may be responsible for the high rate of dental caries we see in space. Current studies have looked at oral species in simulated microgravity, including S. mutans. However, these studies are limited in that most of them are short-term studies and cannot be applied to extended spaceflight missions, or they assess long-term adaptation, but only represent a single SMG population with no normal gravity controls. The way that we simulate microgravity in our lab is a method commonly found in the literature. We use high aspect ratio vessels, or HARVs, where the bacteria and the surrounding media can experience weightlessness. The Earth's gravitational force in the device is reduced from 9.8 to 0.5 meters per second squared. HARV motion is depicted here in the loop video. We found that S. mutans biofilms are typically observed on hydroxyapatite, a solid material responsible for surface enamel repair in humans. We combined these studies to form a new protocol that can be used to study S. mutans biofilms in SMG. So how exactly did we accomplish this? Initially, we had to decide on what type of hydroxyapatite material to use for the study. Our options were either hydroxyapatite beads or hydroxyapatite discs. We wanted an HA medium that could provide accurate and reliable results while properly supporting the biofilms over the course of 100 days. We found that HA beads could be used to gather data, but beyond 21 days, the results became inconsistent. The adhesion data from the beads demonstrated a greater number of live cells on the HA beads and normal gravity control seen in blue over the microgravity treatment in pink after 21 days. We then switched to HA disc and we found that removing the biofilms from them was much more efficient and the results were consistent for use over 100 days. The variation in adherence data seen on the right from the disc is similar to what we would see in publications. It's consistent with published data and our own planktonic data currently under review. So we decided that HA discs were the best way to move forward. And so we moved to the next step, which was adaptation. We knew that we wanted to include both normal gravity and microgravity treatments, but we weren't sure about subculturing the media with the HA disc attached inside. We tested methods to do this, and we found that HA disc adhered to the inside of the HARVs, and they would support S. mutans biofilms through the course of 100 days, as pictured here. Our final step was to develop assays for both phenotypic and genotypic changes associated with S. mutans biofilms adaptation in SMG. We created a process in which the biofilms could be removed from the HA disc and analyzed for various assays, including acid stress tolerance, oxidative stress tolerance, and adhesion. The biofilms removed from the disc could also be used to perform genomic extractions. Here's an example of acid tolerance data that we gathered from the HA disc using the protocol I just described. In summary, over the course of this study, we've been able to successfully develop a new method to grow biofilms in SMG. Our protocol can be used to assess long-term adaptation, phenotypic changes, and perform genomic extractions to find data on biofilms simulated in microgravity. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you for that talk. Just as a general reminder, if anyone is posting questions, please add the name of the student in there. So if we do have to save it towards the end, we'll remember what question goes with which talk. But I do have a question for you, Kellya. Are you guys planning to further develop this and maybe do like a parabolic flight or a drop tower test or some type of longer or other microgravity test?
Actually, Tyler, I'm not familiar with either of those terms. Right now, we're just looking for multi-species biofilms as the next step, just simulating the same microgravity environment with the HARVs with more species.
Okay, yeah, so little plug here, but NASA Glenn actually is home to 2 of the drop towers that are owned by NASA facilities. So we use that a lot, at least in my group, for testing combustion or fluidic systems, and it does give you a kind of a higher degree of microgravity than you can sometimes get in the lab. But I have seen, similar setups to the one you had there and your diagram, mainly for the biological side, especially biofilms and things like that. But even for plants and related work like that, those are fairly common. And there's one thing, I'm not sure if you've come across this or not, but one of our little fluidic tricks for getting things to work in microgravity is what we use. It's called a Kelyah Shah cell. It's almost like a petri dish turned on its side. I was wondering if you came across that term at all.
No, we haven't, but I know
Okay.
that we've used other forms of simulating microgravity besides the HARVs.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
it's very similar to your concept, but I was just curious. Great. There is one question I see in there. So in what ways, if any, has conducting your research validated, refined, or even changed your career instincts?
So I was always interested in microbiology, but this whole simulation of microgravity got me interested into biofilm dynamics overall. So now I'm looking forward to studying just biofilm communities on an ecological side.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I think we're going to have to move on at this time, but thank you again. It was a great talk. Next up, we have Miriam Shah. She's an undergraduate student majoring in chemical engineering and biomanufacturing at North Carolina State. And she received a NASA internship award to work with me actually at Glenn Research Center. So it's great to reunite here virtually. And then her research was focused on gauging capillary action and its application to some of the work we do at NASA Glenn. So Miriam, if you are all set, I can see your slides there and take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. As Tyler just mentioned, my name is Miriam Shah, and in this presentation, I'll just cover some of the work I did as an intern at NASA's Glenn Center last summer. So a quick overview about me first. I'm currently a senior in chemical engineering at NC State, and last summer I worked under Tyler Hatch and Nancy Hall, and my co-intern was Samantha Easton. So the main thing that we worked on over the course of the summer was the Celery Outreach Challenge, and Celery stands for Capillary Effects on Liquids Exploratory Research Experiments. And it's an educational program where students in grades 8 through 12 design their experiments to test capillary action in microgravity using GRC's drop tower. So students design their experiment in a 2D software program called LibreCAD, and GRC takes those proposals and laser cuts them out to be tested with. And the cutout experiment is then placed into this box as shown here on the right. And this video shows what occurs in the drop tower. So as you watch, you can see the fluid rise through the channels as it experiences microgravity. And this video is an example of what the students will receive back after the experiment is tested, and then they can use the video to analyze and draw conclusions. So the main work that came with Celery was updating documents that are listed on the slide, because prior to last summer, the students used a software called DraftSide to do their designs, but unfortunately it was no longer in use, so everything had to be switched over to LibreCAD. So in doing this change, we had to update the original template, the tutorial, the handbook, the flyer, and the website. The main document that we worked on last summer was the tutorial. And this document was written to guide students through the creation of a sample experiment in order them to teach them how to use the software. And the sample experiment created in the tutorial is shown here on the right, with this experiment investigating the effects of the curved channels versus the sharp angle channels. So after we completed this, we actually sent this the tutorial out to 2 high school interns who worked with Nancy Hall. And these interns went through the tutorial and gave us feedback on passages that were unclear and confusing. And the main thing that we learned is that LibreCAD works differently on a Mac versus a Windows. So we went back and added that information into the tutorial for Mac users. The other document that we worked on was the handbook for the students, and this covered the overall rules and design constraints for the competition. And the main thing that we did here was we added in LibreCAD information. We added in a tutorial for ImageJ, which is the software used to analyze the video. And we changed a little bit of the logistical stuff about the competition in the handbook as well. And then after we were done updating the various documents associated with Celery, we moved on to compiling all of this information into the new and updated website. And we did this working alongside Glenn's IT Center. And I also participated in GRC's collegiate competition last summer, where the objective was to design a washing machine for the International Space Station, because astronauts do not have a way to wash their clothes. And NASA had a general layout for the washing machine, but my team and I worked specifically on the dirty water removal step that's circled here. So the objective here was to remove as much water as possible without damaging the fabric of the t-shirt once it had been washed. And we based our design off of a roller that's used in finished fabric manufacturing. And this process uses vacuum extraction to remove water. So the vacuum is usually applied through a rotating perforated drum that sandwiches the cloth. And our design was quite similar, as shown here, where the fabric is pulled through this claw-like mechanism and is passed through a perforated roller with capillary tubes inside of it. And all of the tubes will be attached to this pump line in the middle, pumping the liquid out of the washer to the normal water recovery system. The pump line will be covered in magnets, and there will be magnets inside the claw-like mechanism as well. So this will apply pressure to ensure that majority of the water that can be suctioned out will be. And the red boxes here represent just process controllers. And so in summary, a lot of my internship experience was gaining a lot of knowledge about fluid dynamics and microgravity, thanks to our work with Celery and the International Washing Machine Challenge. And that wraps up my presentation. So thank you so much for listening.
Great, thank you, Miriam. And just to add to it a little bit, so the Celery Challenge is pretty useful to us as NASA engineers because it kind of can simulate any type of disruption in a pipe or a flow line, such as a valve or a faucet, things like that. And then part of the challenge was for the high school students to go and measure the fluid velocity as it traveled along whatever design they made. So Miriam, could you talk a little bit about the tracking? I think you had a note about ImageJ on there as well. What did you work on with that exactly?
So as I mentioned, the ImageJ is used to analyze the video that GRC gives the students. And from what I understand is that they can click on the meniscus of the fluid as it's traveling up. And based on their design, so if it's curved versus sharp angle, they can see if curved angle helps better with capillary action compared to sharp angle curves.
Yeah, definitely. Great. And there is one question in here I see. It sounds like you did quite a bit of work with students as well as your NASA colleagues. So what was it like to work with the high school students in developing some of the documentation?
Yeah, so the high school students helped with the tutorial, and it was wonderful because they were able to provide a fresh perspective because the competition is geared towards their age group. So we could see what challenges that they had with the tutorial and what questions they had regarding the competition, and use that to build the FAQ and the resources section of the website as well.
Okay, great. I do see one question in there. I'll probably have to save that for the end, Miriam. So just as a heads up, but thank you again for your presentation. Great job. And at this time, we're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Ramses Gonzalez. So Ramses is currently a doctoral student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he was awarded an NC Space Grant Graduate Research Fellowship for 2021-2022. And his research is aiming to identify ultra-cool dwarf superflares in the EveryScope database. So Ramses, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right then. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ramses Gonzalez. I'm a graduate student here at the University of North Carolina. And today I will be presenting to you my research of my searching for superflares and ultracold dwarfs using the Evryscopes. So first of all, what are ultracold dwarfs? Well, ultracold dwarfs are very small and very cold stars. As you can see from this picture, they're at the smaller end of the size spectrum, more comparable in size to a planet like Jupiter than our own sun. But why do we care about these stars in the first place? Well, these stars can host a large number of terrestrial planets. The best example of this is the TRAPPIST-1 system, which is known to host 7 terrestrial planets, three of which are within the star's Goldilocks zone. So now that we know that these stars can have terrestrial planets, the next thing we want to look at is their stellar activity. And we do this by analyzing the flares that these stars produce. Now, a flare, very basically is an intense release of electromagnetic radiation from one of these stars. When the energy of these flares exceed 10 to the 33 ergs, we classify this flare as a superflare. For reference, the largest solar flare on record from our own sun is the Carrington event of 1859. And this flare had an energy of 10 to the 32 ergs, just shy of that superflare classification. So the thing is that ultracold dwarfs can produce flares with 10 to 1,000 times more energy. Now, this is very important because in an ultracold dwarf solar system, the planets are much, much closer into their host star. Here is an example of what the TRAPPIST-1 system looks like. And here it is in relation to our own solar system. So as you can see, the planets are much, much closer into their host star. This is critical because that means that if the star ejects a flare, those planets are much more likely to receive a direct hit from that flare. So that's very important for us to understand and to know how frequently these flares happen. The way that we detect these flares is with the Evryscopes. The Evryscopes are a pair of 2 telescopes. One is in Chile in the southern hemisphere, and the other one is Mount Laguna in California. They're composed of 20 to 24 individual cameras each, and they have a combined field of view of over 16,000 square degrees. They observe the sky at 120 second cadence. Now, with these telescopes, we have a massive amount of data, and the way that we automate how we look at this data is with the Evryscope Fast Transient Engine. This is our data pipeline that helps us analyze the Evryscope images by taking an image and then comparing it to a reference image. By looking at the difference between these 2 images, we can more easily see any transient events. In this example right here, you can see at the bottom part of this picture, you can have a little satellite trail on the left side of the difference image, and then a little tiny circle right below that, which is a variable star. And on the far right side of this picture, you have a flare from an M dwarf star. So this is how FD works. And what I did is I input the coordinates for all of the known ultracold dwarfs into the FD pipeline. And what it returned is a long list of possible flare transients. Now, as you can see from this small sample of all the results, a lot of these candidates are not real transients. There are a couple of cosmic rays scattered here and there, and you occasionally see the satellite streaks in a couple of images. But every so often, you do get a very good flare candidate, as you can see here. Now, from my search, I have found a total of 11 strong candidates for superflares from ultracold dwarfs, the brightest of which are these 2 highlighted in red. The first one is for an L2 type star, in which the star got 4.5 million times brighter. And this one is for a star that is approximately 200 light years away from us. The next one is for a star that got 300,000 times brighter and is approximately about 100 light years away from us. It's for a slightly cooler star as well in comparison to the one right before this. So now that we know that we can detect these superflares, the next step is to find out how common these superflares occur. And based on that, what impact they could have on any planets nearby. And if those planets could be potential habitable planets, what impact would it have on life there, either existing or future life that, that could be on that planet. So with all that said, I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Okay, I see there's one question we'll save toward the end. Oh, there's one. Let's see. Did you have to do your research on specific equipment, or was it work you could do remotely?
So the two telescopes, the one in Chile and the one in California, they are located there. We don't have to be, they're remotely accessible. So I can just, the way that the telescopes work is they stream all their data to a server, and then I can access that server directly. So that's how I get the images from each one of these telescopes. And then the FD data reduction pipeline is also built into those servers. So it's just a lot of coding in that from remote access to that server, if that answers the question.
Yep, great. Well, thank you, Ramses. Another great talk. So now next we have Jessica Richter. So she is a master's student at East Carolina, majoring in geography, and she was awarded a joint North Carolina Sea Grant and Space Grant graduate research fellowship for the 2021-22 school year. And she's conducting research mapping shoreline changes in the Neuse River estuary in North Carolina using object-based ensemble analysis, aerial imagery, and LiDAR. So Jessica.
Thank you. Yeah, is everyone able to see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So hi, everyone. As Tyler had mentioned, my name is Jessica Richter. I'm a graduate student at East Carolina University, and I'm the recipient of the NC Space and Sea Grant Graduate Fellowship. I'm eager to share with you all my work on shoreline mapping in the Neuse River estuary of North Carolina. So the Neuse River estuary, shown in the red reference box on the left, is a major tributary to the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system of North Carolina. The estuary has been impacted by a significant portion of the extreme storms that have swept coastal North Carolina in the past 3 decades and is experiencing significant shoreline change, which you can see in the photos on the right. As coastal planners create a management plan for this shoreline environment, decision-making tools are key to implementing informed mitigation and restoration efforts. Shoreline classification maps are a useful tool for understanding both the context as well as the magnitude of storm-induced erosion. In the past, machine learning ensembles and object-based image analysis have been successfully used for shoreline detection and extraction, as well as the classification of a wide range of environments. However, these approaches have yet to be applied to an estuarine shoreline environment, such as the NRE. So in my work, I assess the ability of an object-based ensemble framework to generate accurate shoreline classification maps of the NRE. I'll briefly go over the methodology that was used within this work. So first, spectral imagery was used to create image objects using a multi-resolution segmentation algorithm. These image objects were then spatially matched with LiDAR elevation and intensity data from the North Carolina Floodplain Mapping Program, as well as NDVI and slope parameters to create a matched data set. The matched data set was then used to train 5 machine learning algorithms to classify the NRE shoreline, and it was validated using in situ reference data that was also collected within the NRE. A combination of majority and weighted vote was then used to determine the ensemble result based upon the individual algorithm results. The ensemble results were then used to create a shoreline classification map and uncertainty map of the NRE. The results of the machine learning algorithms are shown on the left, and as predicted, the ensemble analysis produced the highest overall accuracy compared to individual algorithms at 76.4%. However, there was a marginal difference in the ensemble and the next highest individual algorithm, which was the artificial neural network. The ensemble did well at classifying marsh and low sediment bank shoreline classes, but did poorly at classifying high sediment bank and swamp forest classes. And an assessment of ensemble certainty or ensemble agreement was also completed. And it was found that nearly all ensemble results had either complete or partial agreement. The high proportion of partial certainty within the ensemble shows that the individual algorithm performance was variable depending on the shoreline classification, and this supports the use of the ensemble within this study. So overall, the object-based ensemble analysis showed promising results for predicting shoreline classes within an estuarine environment. Broader impacts of this study include applying this workflow to shoreline change, informing new setback regulations, and vulnerability assessments, particularly vulnerability to erosion. An example of that assessment is shown on the right side of the slide. And as storm-induced erosion continues to pose a major threat to the NRE, additional applications of the object-based ensemble framework should continue to be explored to improve future shoreline management and reduce future hazards moving forward. And with that, I'd like to give thanks to the NC Space Grant and NCC Grant programs for this fellowship opportunity and funding support. I'd also like to thank my mentor, Dr. Hannah Siriani, for her support on this project. And for any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out using my contact information found at the bottom of the slide. Thank you for tuning in.
All right, well, thank you, Jessica. There is one question there. How did you land on analyzing both the individual algorithms and the ensemble? Was that always in the research design, or is that something you guys came to a conclusion later on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ensemble was chosen at the start of the project within the research design because in past literature, it's been proven that using an ensemble when classifying land cover can help improve overall accuracy. So that was really something that we wanted to assess from the get-go and compare with the individual algorithms.
Great, well, thank you. And just a final reminder to everybody, we do have one more student talk. So if you guys do have any questions you're sitting on for any of the speakers, feel free to get those in so we can get to those. So Jessica, I guess one more question.
Sure.
Is this something you could apply to, I guess, other estuaries or other areas, or is it unique to North Carolina because of the climate or habitat or whatnot?
Yeah, great question. So I think the beauty of this object-based ensemble framework is that you can integrate different aerial imagery or LiDAR or other parameters from different locations. And hopefully it should be applicable in a variety of estuarine environments. And that is the hope. And that would be a great next step, would be to confirm that in another location as well.
Okay, gotcha. Well, thank you again, Jessica. Okay, and then our final speaker for today is Letice Bussiere. She is a doctoral student at University of North Carolina, Charlotte, who received a NASA internship award at Marshall Space Flight Center through the 2021-2022 school year. And her research is focused on creating a technical handbook for NASA's disruptive modal coupling concepts and technologies. So Letice, if you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Yes, as you said, my name is Letice Bussiere. I'm a first-year doctoral student studying mechanical engineering at UNC-Charlotte. In the summer of 21, I received a NASA internship award and virtually interned at the Marshall Space Flight Center. This is actually my second internship at Marshall, and I was given the opportunity to intern with the same team from my 2019 internship. The focus of my internship was to create a technical handbook that would detail the origin of certain concepts and technologies for NASA's disruptive modal coupling team. Since the internship was virtual, we actually had an intern team of 6 individuals. As a returning intern and the only graduate student, I actually had the opportunity to lead the team. So on top of working on the technical handbook, I was also given the responsibility to create workly week schedules for each intern, as well as lead meetings to ensure that our deadlines were met and our quality work was being completed. I've also included a list of engineers that we had the opportunity to work with while we were interning. In the EV31 department is known as the Spacecraft and Vehicle Systems Department. So during this whole internship, our intern team was working to produce a technical handbook that would contain the development of concepts and technologies for the disruptive modal coupling team. My team was actually the first to work on this task, so we were laying out the origins of key technology that they use today in their research. So within the handbook, we summarized the bulk of research over the years 2009 to 2011. This research included key results and figures from data collection and analysis, as well as important information covered in presentations and reports. With each summary, we provided a link that would allow readers to view the original document that the information was referenced from. And while most of what our team handled was controlled information, I would like to present a general overview of the technologies we worked to provide a history for. And since the team's focus was on the origin, it's important to actually begin with NASA's Ares 1 rocket. So the Ares 1 rocket had an issue identified after a test flight, which is identified as thrust oscillations or resonant burning. Since this is a 5-segment solid rocket booster or SRB, it's not uncommon for the phenomenon to occur, but the concern was that the vibrations were actually reaching the crew exploration vehicle. So the frequency of these vibrations was found to be around 12 hertz, and at this frequency, it actually impaired the astronauts' abilities to perform routine functions such as reading displays. A handful of solutions were identified, but the mitigation system I would like to focus on is the LOX damper. This was an alternative solution designed as a risk mitigation system as opposed to a primary solution, but it is the solution that the EV31 team developed and has continued research on today. So the LOX damper, or otherwise known as a liquid oxygen damper, is a device placed within the liquid oxygen tank of the Ares 1 rocket. Unfortunately, again, due to the nature of the information, I'm not able to provide figures to depict the operation or design of the damper, but I can give an overview of the concepts behind the device. This damper controlled vibrations produced by thrust oscillations by using the liquid's propellant mass to generate momentum. This momentum generated would essentially disrupt the oscillation by countering the vehicle's acoustic response. This technology, developed as a solution to the issue, presented such promising results that when the Constellation program was canceled in 2010, the EV31 team continued their research efforts on the topic, and the team is still improving it to this day. Lastly, I would like to touch on the current research efforts of the team. 2 developments after the LOX damper included rotational tension element damping and fluid structure coupling. These concepts were exported through NASA's technology transfer program and both have patents pending. The technology transfer program helps to make NASA technology developed for discovery and exploration available to the public to maximize its benefits. Both of these concepts utilize principles found in the development of the LOX damper for different applications. The RTED disrupts vibrations using feedback from things such as compression cycles, while fluid structure coupling uses the coupling between fluids and structures to work with the system's dynamics. An example of the FSC in action is provided to the figure to your right. As you can see, the implementation of the device actually successfully mitigated the magnitude of the response. The device has been producing such promising results that it was actually implemented in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Each technology has a wide variety of applications, and thanks to the technology transfer program, we can actually see the many benefits of the research that all began in 2009 with the Ares 1 rocket. And thank you to the Space Grant for this opportunity, and thank you to my mentor who has really been a great resource inside and outside of my internships. Thank you.
All right, great. That was a really interesting talk. I know a lot of folks at my center, NASA Glenn, have worked on the Ares rocket. And as you mentioned, they discontinued it, but it still feeds into a lot of the new work they're doing with the Space Launch System, SLS, and some of the newer hardware. So that was pretty interesting. I don't see any questions in there, but I guess, let's see. Yeah, I think this was for you. So can you speak more about how the implementation of your research has informed some of the more current work?
I actually cannot. A lot of that is information I'm not allowed to speak on. I wish I could, but a lot of work has actually resulted from it. Unfortunately, I can't give any specifics, but they have a handful of new projects in development that have resulted from the research that we did to create like a handbook that would show them where everything originated from. And so yeah, that's about as much as I can say, but it's a good question.
Right. And then another question, same thing applies if you can answer it or not, but they were asking what the role was regarding the communications for the handbook.
I don't know if I understand what the question is asking.
And maybe if the speaker has a follow-up or clarification, they could post that in there. But anyways, at this time, I would like all the rest of the Student Lightning Talk participants to turn their cameras on and join us here. We do have a couple questions for the group as well that we can look at as we're waiting on that one. So there was a question for Miriam I want to go back and look at. So this is regarding the washing machine work. And the question was if you could talk more about how your methodology changed over time as you were looking at that project. And then in what ways, if any, did you have to change your research direction after gathering more information?
So with the washing machine challenge, we were assigned a mentor as well, specifically for the challenge. Please excuse my cat in the background. We would present our ideas to him, and he would give us feedback on whether or not they were feasible. So with his feedback, we were able to change the course of our project to the final result that we had.
Yep, and it was definitely an iterative process, and it's something that we're still kind of working through. If new research comes up, we'll definitely try and incorporate it. And the plan was to make that a yearly event moving forward with different students designing a washing machine challenge. So it's a pretty fun project. Okay, there is one general question. This is really for all the speakers. So if anyone wants to jump up and ask it, feel free to. So how do you guys identify research topics and develop a proposal that is inherently yours, but also fits into your mentor's bigger picture within a lab?
I'll take that question if that's all right. So for us working with the Everyscopes, what we have with the Everyscopes is they're constantly monitoring the sky, which means we get terabytes of data per night, which means we have a lot of information to work with. So the question of how do we pick interesting research topics is basically, well, we have all of these scientific images, what can we gather from them? And in terms of the ultra-cool doors, I had a previous mentor and now graduate student who was working with ultra-cool doors. And in my conversations with him, he encouraged me to look into some of these objects and then explain kind of the importance of them and then what then next steps could be. And from that, doing my own research into both some of the works that he wrote up, as well as some of the other things that people were publishing. I came up with a way to use what we have, our Everyscope database, and have a proposal for the Space Grant project, if that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that insight into it. And then one final question. This is for any or all participants. What is one of the most important lessons you've learned or a skill you've gained through your research experience? I think Ramses, you did kind of touch on it. I mean, you're kind of learning to be your own independent researcher, your independent scientist, engineer, write your own proposals, develop your own work. So that's definitely something I think a lot of folks can take away from this program is learning that type of skill.
Absolutely. I think another big skill, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tyler. But I think that one of the biggest things in just even writing the proposal is just learning how to conduct a background search on a particular topic. I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of digging around, looking for very old or just hidden papers to just get the information that I was looking for specifically. So it is a very good lesson on how do you research topics in the first place.
All right, thank you. All right, so at this time, we're actually going to end our lightning talk session. Just as a reminder, the next session begins at 3:50 Eastern today, and we are going to keep sharing student video competitions during the break. So thanks again to our student speakers. You all did a great job, and it's a pleasure to hear what your research is about. So thanks again.